guys, welcome and welcome to There Is Still Hope. Thank you so much for joining me and thank you for tuning in. Well, if you're new to my channel, I am Dalenga, and Dalenga is the founder of There Is Still Hope. There Is Still Hope is a place where we gather to encourage each other to move away from places of defeat, places of discouragement, places that manage to break us down, and literally dust off and move on and live a life that matters. In a nutshell, we're saying there is still hope. If this is your first time to my channel, please do subscribe and become part of There Is Still Hope family. Well, I'm back, and I'm back with a different episode. If this is anything that interests you, stay tuned. Well guys, once again, welcome back to There Is Still Hope. I am not alone. I have someone with me. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to hear your story. I cannot wait to hear where you have been. You know, what makes you this woman that you are. You know, we met a couple of times, a wonderful woman of God. Thank you so much for joining me. Bianca, I'm so excited to have you here. I know this is long overdue. Yeah. But nonetheless, God's time is the best time. Well guys, before I give her the platform to just introduce herself, well, this is solely to give back the glory to the maker of heaven and earth, the one who has no equal, the one who has no match. He kept her together. You know, you are who you are today because God remained faithful to you. Oh yes. So to him alone goes all the glory, to him alone goes all the honor. He's a faithful God, and that's why we are here to give back all the glory to the one who kept you together till this moment. Well guys, we're talking about where has Bianca been? What has she been through? How did she come to know about the Lord Jesus Christ? And who is she today? That's what we're looking at today. Literally saying, well, there is still hope. Welcome to There Is Still Hope, Bianca.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm so excited. Kindly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Right. Thank you so much, Dalenga, for this invitation and just for this wonderful platform that you have. I follow your work and it's really impactful and full of purpose. So I feel privileged to be here. So as introduced, my name is Bianca Neumbo. A child of God at core. If anything about me, one thing is that I'm really a Jesus girl. So I'm a wife. Additionally, I'm also a mother. By profession, a medical laboratory scientist, and by calling, a pastor. So yeah, that's who I am.
We're talking about a child of God through and through.
Yeah, at the core.
Thank you so much for joining me once again, Bianca.
A pleasure.
Stay tuned. Well, Bianca, we all have roots. We all have places where we come from. And we have a genesis, you know. Who is Bianca?
I am an only girl child, a second born of 4, and I am the only girl. Okay. So I've got 3 siblings who are boys, born in Windhoek, grew up in Windhoek, and I grew up in Soweto. Okay. So also attended my primary education here in Windhoek as well. Okay. Secondary education also here in Windhoek at Nyonka Afrikaner High School. So briefly growing up, I grew up with family, at family home. I was born in Windhoek, then I left for the village until I then came back to Windhoek again for school. Okay. So I grew up at a family house, so it was extended family where there are cousins, uncles, and so forth. So I didn't grow up with my biological parents, but I grew up in the care of a garden. Okay. So my upbringing was really one where I didn't lack anything growing up. The basic things that I needed were always provided for me. I had really a good childhood, relatively, if you compare to other people who were not as fortunate as I was. So unfortunately, the only thing is that I didn't grow up with the actual presence of my biological parents.
Okay.
Yeah, however, they were still involved in my life. Holiday times, I would go to them, visit my mother, and then return for school again. Generally, as a quiet girl growing up, I think still I am a quiet person. So I was really more introvert. So most of the times I was just trying to keep it safe and not be in trouble.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, that's really my childhood. So I grew up in a very fortunate time where community was important,
Yeah.
where the neighbors were also equally involved in our lives. So we played around. That really contributed to our childhood and really just our early years. Yeah.
You actually mentioned that you had, a fair childhood. Of course, not with your biological parents being around. Was there a time that you kind of like felt not belonging? The fact that you had to live with guardians.
All right. So obviously, at that time, you would just do what you needed to do.
Okay.
So basically, as in Windhoek, my sole purpose being in Windhoek was for school. So I had to just wing it and then ensure that I do go through that, successfully through that.
Okay.
But of course, as a child, you really need the presence of your parents because they really determine really most of the decisions that you make and sort of who you do become. And so for me, I always felt the void of my biological parents not being there, in that I didn't have the reassurance that I needed. I didn't have the sense of identity, of belonging. So I kept wondering what that would look like if my parents were around. And so obviously when you have got those gaps and those questions, you sort of try and find answers to them. And unfortunately, you don't always get those answers from the right people. And so sometimes the streets are the ones who answer you those questions.
Of course.
The streets are the one who define who you are. The streets are the one who validate what is right about you, what is beautiful, what is acceptable about you. And so that in itself began a whole different journey for me as a child, trying to really find myself. And in the midst of different voices, people who are trying to tell you that this is how you're supposed to be. And sometimes you try and adopt those and you discover along the way that this was perhaps not the right thing to do. But you engage in so many different things, just trying to really fit in because you are not, you're not even having a place where you feel like I belong. So you now want to fit in to sort of belong. So that began a whole different journey of trying to find myself, whereas there was no even a foundation to begin with.
In the process of finding yourself, did you had anybody you looked up to?
Right. So that's interesting because again in our time this were not structured. So obviously when you do have your parents around, they sort of provide those structures for you. Most people I know look up to their parents. They're influenced by what their parents do. So I did not have that structured approach to trying to sort of like find myself. And so I didn't really have sort of adequate role models per se. But I remember there was always a voice that kept me going, that always spoke to me in the midst of trying to find myself. I didn't know that was the voice of God. I didn't grow up from a Christian home, so I didn't know that was the voice of God until only recently, maybe 2 years ago, when the Lord spoke to me in the exact same words. And I began to understand that He has always been that guiding voice. But generally, I really did not have physical mentors or people that I looked up to. Besides just people who maybe made it through the same situation that I did, and who their stories were now a success story. And so mine was to look up to them and sort of like also desire to just succeed. Yeah.
Okay, listening to you actually quite interesting, and I love the way you are bringing it across. You sound like somebody who really wanted peace all the time. Like, I don't want to be an intruder. I'm okay being here. Tell us, who influenced you in your childhood growing up?
All right. So obviously when you come from a place where the people who are supposed to provide safety for you are not present, you want to sort of like take ownership of that. I'm a second born, and I've noticed it's a trend towards second borns. Firstborns generally want to make things happen and work.
Yeah.
And second borns, they want to maintain the peace because they now understand that there's already a lot happening.
Yeah.
So you don't want to add to the problem. Yeah, so fortunately, where I grew up, all of us grew up there, my siblings as well, were at the same house. One of the people that really influenced me was my older brother. So he was someone who was a go-getter and wanted to make sure that the rest of us are fine.
Okay.
And so he really influenced me in a way that made me appreciate that everything that is given to you is actually an opportunity for you to make the best out of it. So I understood the limitations I had, but that influence helped me to really understand that, you know what, out of this, they can still come out something good. Yeah.
Beautiful personality.
Thank you.
Well, guys, stay tuned. Bianca, screening through your childhood, what emotions surfaced most of the time growing up? Tell us about your fears.
I love the fact that you ask about fears because there were a lot of fears. Like I said, there was really no actual security. I didn't have that stability. When you grow up at a home that is not yours, you really don't know what to expect. Yeah.
A lot of limitations as well.
Yes. Yeah, you can't fully express yourself.
Yeah.
So for example, and I think also it maybe has to do with the time that we grew up in. Now people encourage more gentle parenting.
Yeah.
In our time, it wasn't like that. So you wouldn't know when you would get a slap on your head. So this really contributed so much to also the struggles that I encountered as an adult, because I was not someone who fully expressed themselves.
Yeah.
And so there was always that fear of how will this come forth? How will this be understood? So in our time, you don't know when to speak and when not to speak. You're asked a question, you respond to the question, and it's as if you are speaking back at somebody. And when you don't speak, it's like you're being stubborn while you're not responding. And so part of that, those fears, actually my voice was stolen because I didn't know when to speak. And so I couldn't articulate my emotions.
Yeah.
And I could not express when I'm feeling hurt. I couldn't express when I'm feeling disappointed. And so generally, you had that fear of like, what are people going to say? What are people going to think about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so those were some of the fears. Also, along with that, some of the emotions that I felt were anxiety.
Yeah.
So you're always anxious because you don't know, like, are you gonna get in trouble now? Because trouble was not really defined as trouble. Anything could be trouble.
Yeah.
Anything could get you in trouble. So like I said, I try to really play it safe and always be on the safe side, just to ensure that, you know, the main thing that I'm here for, I complete that, and then from there determine like what else I'm gonna do with my life. So those were some of the emotions that I experienced as a child, although most of the emotions also were suppressed. Even joy, I couldn't fully express joy because you don't know, is this gonna be long term, or is it just joy for the moment, and the next moment you have to return back to being afraid. Yeah, so those were some of the emotions, and even until growing up, that's when I realized that, you know, I had these challenges. I had things that I've never unpacked. I had emotions that were never expressed. Yeah.
I was going to ask, what are the emotions that you're still seeing coming up in your adulthood? You know, and would you say that you kind of like found healing? Because our childhood has a way of forming us into who we are today, especially if we don't go back and revisit and actually get them sorted out. What would you say are those emotions that you're still seeing surfacing in your adulthood?
Generally, for me, this it came through when after I gave birth. So that's when I discovered that I really have some serious emotional wounds that were never dealt with, never addressed. That's the time when I started seeking therapy, which I highly recommend, really just to unpack and to understand, why do I feel so afraid? Part of the things, I think also because the time I gave birth was the time of COVID. So there was a lot of isolation, there was a lot of fear.
It contributed.
Yes. And so I needed to really unpack, like, why do I feel afraid? Why do I feel anxious? So some of those things like anxiety, depression was one of the things that I encountered. I had postpartum depression. Thank God it wasn't really extreme. It was controlled. It was mild. So I had to understand myself, like, why do I feel depressed? Why do I feel lost? So those are some of the things that still surfaced. And people pleasing was another thing.
People pleasing comes with difficulty in saying no.
Yes, because you want to always be accepted. You want to always be right, to do the correct thing. And so I really struggled with people pleasing at my own detriment. So I would always be the one to suffer because I can't say no to people. And so until I understood that there comes a point where you even have to stand up now for your own kids. So if you can't say no for yourself, you can't even stand up for your kids. And so now it became a process where I really needed to understand, why is it that I can't say no? Why am I struggling to say no? And what's going to happen if I say no? And so I really needed to make conscious efforts through therapy to really identify my personality type and where do I get that from, and also to understand
what are the weaknesses.
Yes, what are the weaknesses, and how can I address that, and also to sort of balance it with my strengths. So when you understand that, you know, I'm strong at this, your weaknesses sort of become powerless. Yes. So if you understand that just because of this certain weakness, it doesn't holistically define the person that I am. And so in that, it really enabled me to understand that even if people perceive a weakness, when my strengths do come forward, they cannot just solely define me based on my weakness. And so even if I fail and I say no, or I disappoint somebody in the process of really trying to stand up for myself, I still have that ground to say that this is not all that there is about me. If this person chooses to just see that about me, that's fine. But it's not just all that there is about me. One
thing I like about personality and about the look of things, you understand it. You know, when you understand your personality, you understand who you are, you understand what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths. You can easily kind of like have self-awareness that right now I'm dealing from my weakness.
Yes.
Right now I'm dealing from my strength. And how do I cover up my weaknesses with my strength?
Yes.
And I love that.
Yes.
Before we move on to the next question, let's talk about your self-esteem. In the process of growing up, how you explained it, how did you uphold it? What damage was done to it? How did you recover it?
Yes. All right. So I think in my journey there is, and I like how this platform says that there is still hope, because in the midst of all the struggles, somehow hope always just does spring forth. Yeah. And it's the same in my journey. There was a point in time where my self-esteem was not really well established, because I believe that as we grow up, we need someone to esteem us, someone to say that you are enough, someone to validate you, someone to say that, you know what, you can do this. Yeah. And I did not always have that voice. The voices that I heard were voices that were sort of discouraging and left me questioning my abilities and therefore affecting my self-esteem, right? But what I like about my journey is, although I did not encounter the Lord from a very young age, there was always that voice from the Lord. So every time when I felt inadequate, the Lord would always tell me that there is something different about you. Yeah. There is something unique about you. So for me, that voice from the Lord, it really reaffirmed me. And it really, it was the beginning of my now trying to discover who I am and find my worth. So I always had a resounding voice that assured me, and that enabled me to really rise to the occasion and say that, you know what, I am capable, to sort of now reaffirm myself. And I had not known all along that it was actually the voice of the Lord. So somehow my self-esteem was like affected, but again, it was always quickly restored. Yeah. Hope always quickly came through. Yeah.
And when it's a voice of God, it's a voice within.
Yeah, it is a voice within. As a child, I thought it was my own voice. I thought it was my own voice. I thought it was my own self-belief. I didn't really have that distinction that this is the voice of the Lord as a child. Yeah, but it is a voice within you that is always there, guiding you, reassuring you.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that it's from within, that makes it stronger, you know, instead of having a voice externally that can change anytime, and when it's not there or it's not assuring enough, it can actually get you broken down. That's really educating.
Yeah.
Behind every believer is a story. You know, behind every believer is a turning point. Behind every believer is a mighty hand of God that, you know, turned us and brought us home. We're here to hear your story. Tell us, how did you meet this Lord Jesus Christ? How did you come to him? What brought you to him? Where did he take you from? You know, tell us, how did you give your life to the Lord Jesus Christ?
All right. So it was not always yes to the Lord. I kept running away from people who tried to preach the gospel to me.
So you were like Jonah.
I was like, you can keep that aside. I don't want to hear about your Jesus thing. You guys always tell me this Jesus thing. I'm not interested. So there was a way to sort of identify them from far. You'd know that this person is coming for me, and you would sort of like escape them and already block that conversation.